So today in the New Testament, we start reading the letter to the Hebrews, and no one actually knows who the author of this letter is. We think it's a bit too different from Paul's letters to have been written by him. So some people speculate about it being Apollos, other people talk about Barnabas, but we don't really know. What we do know is that it's clearly written from reading it to Jewish Christians who are struggling, having converted to Christianity and following Jesus. They're kind of struggling with some of the old ways of doing things, and they're wondering about going back to them, and so they're caught up in these concepts of angels and priesthood. And so the writer to the Hebrews is really trying to communicate to them, look, you don't need to worry about the old ways now and the law and all that stuff about sacrifice and things like that, because Jesus is the ultimate he supersedes all of that. Because of Jesus, we don't need to be stressed about any of those other things now. So even in this first chapter, we see that clearly, where he's saying you're getting caught up with angels, and what you don't realize is how high Jesus is above even the angels. He absolutely dominates. And that's why the letter to the Hebrews begins with this description of Jesus that's just amazing. And so let me just read a couple of verses from that. He says, in the past God spoke through the prophets. This is the final word. God's last word is in Jesus. And what that means is, if we want to know what God is like, if we're interested in understanding how he thinks, how he acts, the things that matter to him, there's no place better to look than the person of Jesus. And often you might find that people come and they say, oh, God, in the Bible he kills loads of people in the Old Testament, and they'll go on and on and on about the way in which God acts in the Old Testament. And although that's valid, and it's the same God, and actually when you dig into the Old Testament in a bit more depth, you see that it's not quite how it seems on the surface. Although all of that may be true, in the New Testament, that's when God really reveals who he is. And so to talk about God without looking at the person of Jesus is like walking kind of part way up a mountain and saying, oh, the view from here is not very good. Well, you only know if the view from the top of the mountain is any good if you walk all the way to the summit. And we only understand really what God looks like when we see him made flesh. He's God made flesh in the person of Jesus. And that's where we see what God is like most clearly. So he's spoken to us in these last days by his Son. And then he goes on and on about how the Son is the radiance of God's glory, the exact representation. That's why when you look at Jesus, you're looking at God. And finally, he sustains all things by his powerful word. Just as God spoke everything into existence in Genesis chapter 1, so too he continues by that same word that he spoke everything into existence. It continues to be sustained. So just consider that for a second, that I and you, whatever device you're watching this on, the Bible that you hold in your hand, the chair that you're sitting on, the room that you're in, the country that you're in, the earth that we're all on, all of this is sustained simply by a word. That is how powerful he is. So why not bring your need to him today? Why not bring the thing that you need help with today to the all-powerful, exact representation of God himself?